Hi, my name's Harry Lightman, and I am a licensed psychologist here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And in my own modest way, I'm trying to get up to the plate here to address something that many of us are aware of, which is something that's terribly wrong in this country, and it doesn't seem to be self-correcting. It's not going to go away on its own. So we need to take some action. Question is when, where, and how. As effective problem solvers, generally we're on safest ground when we first identify what is what is our state of mind, what is our struggle. And in addressing that, I think I'll first use my language system, then switch over to a language system that you're probably more familiar with. Using my language system, what we're experiencing right now is a loss of equilibrium or disequilibrium. And as this slide shows, a state of equilibrium is a wonderful state of mind because it allows us a sense that every day is manageable. So it's a state where the good stuff fluctuates with the not so great stuff, but it's like a teeter-totter. It may go up and down, but it largely stays within an acceptable range. It balances out. But sometimes we lose that sense of equilibrium, and we can lose it through two ways. One way is abruptly, and that might be caused by trauma or sudden death, betrayal, or false hope. And I would say, as or more common for many people, loss of equilibrium is tied to just the cumulative effect of being worn down by everyday life. So there's setbacks, disappointments, things haven't worked out the way we want them to. And so, in a proverbial straw that broke the camel's back moment, we were just despairing. Now, shifting over to a language system that you're probably more familiar with, which is just this notion of being stressed out of our minds or acute anxiety. Certainly, there are many sources of that, and they come in all varieties, and they've been with us for a short time or a long term. So, in most media, many people are focused on the political unrest of the country, and that's for real. But also, some of us might be stressed out because of less immediate, but not so long ago type of events, which would be maybe still dealing with the aftermath of COVID, since we lost 1 million citizens to COVID. And then I think, again, I think a lot of people are feeling stressed out because of the cumulative long-standing issues. And there are many, and many are so personal and varied that the ones I've mentioned now don't even apply to you. But for what it's worth, three examples of longstanding issues of stress for me would be misinformation, us fearing that we're falling behind in life. Um, and then I think for many parents, a crucial longstanding issue is just feeling overwhelmed with the challenges and the complexity of parenting. And needless to say, that is becoming a more challenging and more complex task day by day. So if we're stressed out or anxious or in a state of disequilibrium, how do we get out of this? Well, I'm proposing an action plan that doesn't focus on politics. I think that's divisive and really doesn't touch upon many of the issues that I think we are most upset about. I'm actually proposing that we focus on the development and welfare of our children and grandchildren. And so, if we're going to look at development, child development, let's use Eric Erickson's remarkable psychosocial theory of development. And as shown in this present slide, let's focus on two features of this theory of development. Importantly, it's a lifespan theory of development. So importantly, we have to focus on our development if we're going to help our kids in their development. So if we are really focusing on the welfare of our children, we should be working on stage or phase 7 of Erickson's theory of development. And that would be acquiring a sense of generativity versus a sense of self-absorption. And what Erickson means here is generativity, of course, is defined as just giving priority to our kids and their welfare. And self-absorption is the alternative. If we really can't pay attention to them, then we lapse into self-involvement and self-importance. So that's one thing to think about in Erickson's model. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is the contingency aspect of this model. And that is, in Erickson's theory, you cannot progress to a more advanced phase of development until you've successfully resolved a more basic level of development. So in Erickson's theory, you potentially have a 50-year-old working on the same developmental issues as a 10-year-old. From my experience, the cornerstone or foundation of development has to be the concept of reality. And I'm defining reality here simply as a source of guidance and a source of points of reference for us. And as this slide suggests, there is only one reality, is not an option, and it's like oxygen, it's essential to life. And to illustrate the humbling character of reality, we have a picture of the most experienced sailor in the world here. And you may or may not know, but even the most experienced sailor, he or she, out in the open water, away from land, and in the absence of navigational aids, which is reality, will never make it back to land unless they bump into good luck or a freighter that happens to pick them up. But quite literally, if a sailor is out on open water without navigational aids, they have no way of making it back to land. They are truly lost. I don't think any of us want that to be the fate of our children and grandchildren. In fact, we are determined to have them make it back to land. It's the three levels of reality that most of us bump into in the course of everyday living. So most of us are parties to one or more, hopefully more than one, social compacts, which are just social understandings between two people. It's based on mutual benefits and it stays together as long as there are mutual rewards. Next type of reality that many of us are part of is a culture. And a culture is an identifiable group of three or more people headed up by one or two leaders for a identified goal or purpose. And examples of a culture might be a family or family unit or self-contained classroom or a work group that we are a part of in our work life. And those work groups now might be convened virtually as well as in person. Um, and finally, we all deal with what I call the granddaddy of all realities, and that is everyday reality. It is pervasive. It covers, it blankets our whole country, and therefore it literally knits us together. And if we don't support that reality, it will tear us apart. So let's briefly talk about the three qualities or elements of everyday reality that we really need to respect. One is its status. I mean, it is the boss of all realities. Both compacts and cultures are subordinate and necessarily so to everyday reality. And the priority of everyday reality is staggering. Um, it's a magnificent but humbling priority in that it is responsible for the welfare of all of us. And that is every one of us, whether we're citizens or non-citizens, everyday reality must uphold our welfare and make us safe. And then finally, uh, the responsibilities of everyday reality are several. I do want to bring you to the last two of these elements that responsibilities that I've noted here, which is actively enforce all laws to keep us in line with reality, but as importantly, having orderly means in place to change reality, because reality has to change to support our ever changing world that we live in and the complexities of life. So, reality must be able to amend itself. And of course, we do that in this country by amending our constitution, changing laws, or altering our behavior based on data collected. Let's end this video with a brief demonstration of the power of everyday reality through my own clinical work with kids and families. And specifically, sometimes very willful kids find their way to therapy. And willfulness is just a genetically transferred temperament. And it's quite simply the person wants his or her way. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Actually, more willful people, when it's harnessed to constructive ends, are remarkably successful people. But conversely, if willfulness is not harnessed to constructive ends, it's just a life of heartache and disappointment. So willful kids quite often come to therapy with a history of just being emotional whirlwinds and upsetting family life, school life, and really pretty lonely because they're so insufferable socially. So willful kids come to therapy, and I really enjoy these kids and families, and we've had a good bit of success with these kids, and it really quite often starts with a wonderfully simple intervention and interview. And in this illustration, I'm imagining a willful child, boy or girl, age, say 8 or 10, parents, two parents, and myself. And I always start this intervention with a question that really stirs a good bit of tension and anxiety when it's first posed, which is, who here secretly wants their own way all the time? Who here wants their own way all the time? Now, the nervousness in the room is generally evidenced by the parents. So if I'm not the first person to raise his or her hand, I'm the second. In fact, usually the first person to raise their hand, not surprisingly, is the willful child, then me, and then reluctantly one or both of parents, usually both. So if that reality is established, then the next question that is posed is, well, if we insist on having our own way all the time, what will that look like? And very quickly, even with a young child, a consensus is arrived at that it'd just be constant fighting. It would just be an ongoing battle. And then the next question I ask, well, if we all want our own way and it's an ongoing battle, who likes that lifestyle? Who wants to be fighting all the time? And that inquiry generally elicits no raised hands at all. In fact, I can't remember ever a hand being raised in the office. And while there are exceptions, I'm sure to that, there's never been one in the office. And then finally, the final question I pose to the family is, if we all want our own way, but we don't like fighting, how do we find our way out of this? What's the solution? And again, even with very young kids, the family comes up with what I think is the most appropriate solution is we learn to take turns. We take turns. So, on that note, and a wonderful testimony to reality, we stop here. Please take good care of those wonderful families you're a part of. Let's stick together. Let's try to build a community. Let's not get worked up because that is not in our best interest, certainly not in our kids' best interest. Let's keep at it and we will get to a better place. All right. So long for now. Thanks so much for your time. And again, after I sign off, you'll notice the reference of the Dava Sobel book on longitude. And like many of these little videos, there will be a book at the end that might prove helpful for people who want to get into something in a more detailed way. Thanks so much and goodbye for now.